be the line of Seth, and the daughters of men would be the line of Cain, and the Nephilim would be the intermixing of those two groups. Yeah. Has anyone heard anything else? I'm just kind of curious. What? Neanderthals. Oh, that's an interesting one. Okay. So like, that's almost like a theistic evolution view or something. I don't know. Yeah. What else? What else have you guys heard? I've heard a lot of different views. I'm surprised this one hasn't been thrown out. I have some family members who believe this, that the Nephilim were ancient aliens. Yeah, ancient aliens. Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. Lizard people, I've heard that one. I've heard a lot of some wild theories on what the Nephilim are. So the Nephilim are kind of an interesting, it's an interesting concept because they're just mentioned this once, really. There's a couple other places in Scripture where they're mentioned. But I think that encourages a lot of speculation because they're just kind of mentioned out of the blue and then not really talked about much after that, right? Like, who are these guys? What does this mean, right? So I have a handout for you guys that kind of lays out some of the more common views. I know some of you guys would love us to talk about ancient aliens, but we're actually not. Can I get a couple people to hand out some of these? Hand out to people as they trickle in. Okay. So, as you guys are getting those handouts, one of the things that would be helpful to do is to grab a Bible. If you don't have one, there's one, you can grab a Pew Bible. We're mostly going to be in Genesis 6, but there's a couple other passages that we're going to look at. So yeah, grab a Bible, open up to Genesis 6, and maybe if you can, put a bookmark in Genesis 6. You can use your handout as a bookmark or something like that. So we're going to we're going to bounce back and forth Genesis 6, but you can also open up your Bibles to 2 Peter, what are we looking at? Yeah, 2 Peter chapter 3. So 2 Peter chapter 3. I don't know if Mark brought this verse up in his sermon. Maybe he did. But if he didn't, I'm going to bring it up. So yeah, 2 Peter chapter 3. This is so Peter talks a lot about the time of the flood, more so than any other New Testament writer. And a lot of the things he says about the flood is very interesting. He makes some comments that kind of make you scratch your head like, whoa, what does that mean? So this is one of the things that he says that's really thought-provoking. So this is 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 6 and 7, and it says this: "And that by means of these the world that then existed was deluged with water and perished. But by the same word the heavens and earth that now exists are stored up for fire, being kept until the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly." So you guys hear what he's saying there, that the flood, the world that was before the flood, was almost a completely different heavens and earth. And after the flood, the heavens and earth and now is been fundamentally changed. There's almost like two worlds, that before the flood and that after the flood, is what he says. So this is just important to kind of ground the importance of the flood, that this is one of the key reasons why, I believe the flood was global, like it was a worldwide flood, because it seems like Peter's describing it as a fundamental change of how creation works almost. It doesn't seem like this is just describing like a local flood. But also just like that there's something, we don't really know. He doesn't explain all the differences of how things changed before the flood and after the flood. But it should give us this expectation that we should find things before the flood that are strange to us, that are foreign. And I think one of the key examples that comes to my mind is people before the flood lived to be like almost 1,000 years old. Like they were like Yoda, like I think Yoda lived to be like 900 something. That's kind of like the way people before the flood were living, right? And that changes after the flood, right? So there seems to be like differences like that, but I'm sure there are other differences. If you watch that, the like Hollywood movie of Noah, apparently the Nephilim were rock monsters. I don't know if you saw they were like fallen angels that came down from heaven and were like embedded in rock or something like that. They look kind of goofy, but anyways, yeah. So, but I think that strangely enough, what that Hollywood movie got right is that there were things that were different in the way the world worked before the flood than after the flood, right? And I think in a large extent, we have to kind of suspend judgment on what those things exactly are. We weren't given like a physics textbook before the flood of like, okay, these are the laws of nature before the flood, and we weren't given another physics textbook after the flood. Like, all right, now this is what has changed, right? We can't nail down with that kind of precision exactly what God has done. We can speculate, and some people have, and that can be helpful. Sometimes it can be a little like, I think, too speculative, and you can read too much into the text. But yeah, any other thoughts? Do you have any thoughts on 2 Peter chapter 3 and what you're seeing here? He says a lot of really interesting things here. I'm just trying to give you guys a background of trying to think through what the flood is like, a kind of theology of the flood, if that makes sense. I know some of you guys are trickling in, so.
Well, it says that the whole world was destroyed by the flood.
Right, yeah.
It doesn't say anything about it. The whole world, verse 6, which the world at the time was destroyed being flooded with waters. That's all encompassing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you repeat that, Dave?
So he was just saying, he said the whole world was deluged with water, not just part of it, right? Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I picture like the great big one continent, and then the flood coming and cracking the continents and separating them around.
Yeah, that's a theory. Yeah, that's possible. Yeah.
It's got all those weird animals. Like how did they get there? I don't know. Maybe they're leftovers from before the flood.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of funny memes about different animals that Noah had to try and bring onto the ark. One of them is like all the crazy Australian animals that seem like they're designed to kill you and everything. All the freaky big spiders and stuff like that are there. Yeah. But that is a theory. Yeah, Pam.
I was going to say, and I'm not sure if this is what you were getting at, but I heard it somewhere, and I thought, I don't know, is that true? That it hadn't really rained.
Yeah, that's a view that you'll hear that there was like a canopy, like that when Genesis 1 talks about waters over the earth, that there was like some kind of dome that covered the earth, and there was like an ocean above the earth that then flooded the earth. That's possible. I'm a little skeptical of that because it seems to me what Genesis is talking about, a firmament. It's thinking of just explaining why the sky is blue, so it's just like and why it rains. Water comes from the heavens It's just talking, it's like an idiomatic way of expressing that. Just like how we'll describe rain as like the heavens opening. Sometimes we'll talk about that, does that mean we literally think that there's like a window that opens when it rains? Like, no, it's just an idiomatic expression. That's kind of the way I would view Genesis. But I'm trying to say, the main point I want to get across to you too is that there are some things we can say about the flood, but a lot of things that we have to be careful not to be too dogmatic about, because we just don't have enough information. So I think it's good to think it through, to think maybe there was Pangea, that like the flood cracked open. But we shouldn't believe that to the same degree that, we believe Jesus rose from the dead. Does that make sense? So the Nephilim is more in this category, where there's different views that we're going to have on who the Nephilim were and, what they were like and that kind of thing. But a lot of that's going to be fairly speculative, and we got to hold it more lightly than we would hold other key doctrines. Like the death and resurrection of Jesus. Like, we should hold that, be more certain of that than we are of who the Nephilim are, all right? So just trying to frame that for you guys. Yeah, Bruce, did you have something?
Yeah, I guess a warning from mistakes I made in my youth. I was got home with all these things, and Genesis says this and says that. And I had other friends that I recognized they were saying Revelation said, as if it were written directly to us, and bypassing everyone in between. And I thought,
Right.
arrogance for me to think, for instance, in Revelation, that the persecuted church really has nothing to say to the persecuted church of the time.
Right.
That doesn't make sense. So he said, are there things that were important for Israel in their context to have to be, and lots of the creation thing is, whatever God is saying doesn't mean, very often they're saying, it's telling them, like for instance, in contrast to what the world around them is saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it doesn't necessarily answer all of our questions, because it didn't set out to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, Alan.
I think one thing that Peter is trying to say here is that the Word of God is just as true in that day as it is today.
Ooh.
People are doubting the coming of Jesus. And Peter's saying, well, the Word of God is this, and Jesus is going to return. So, and
Yeah.
about a day being 1,000.
And he draws a parallel between the flood, which changed everything, and the fire that's coming, that's also going to change heaven and earth again. There's going to be a new heavens and new earth after the final judgment of Christ, right? But the difference is, whereas the flood almost seems like it's describing the world, it almost like made the world worse. Like people aren't living as long. There's kind of a limit to, the longevity of people's lifespans and that kind of thing. The new heavens and new earth after the final judgment is going to be way better, So he's drawing some parallels, but he's also making, I think, some contrasts, right? Yeah. Did I see a hand up over somewhere? Okay. Well, did everyone get a handout? I know some people were like trickling in. If anyone needs a handout, I think they're still going around.
There's a pile up here.
There's a pile of extras in the front if you want to grab one. Okay, so this handout, I just made it to try and give you guys an outline of. I'm going to just outline 3 different views of what the Nephilim are and how kind of to help you think through this. And hopefully draw out some helpful things about just Genesis 6 in general, because I think there's a lot to the beginning of Genesis 6. So I'm just going to read this passage. We're looking at Genesis chapter 6. We're just going to look at verses 1 through 8. So I'm just going to read that for you guys now. When man began to multiply in the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men of old, the men of renown. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, men and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. So I read that to kind of give you some context of this. I'm going to start by just laying out the evidence for like the standard. We talked about this as being like probably the most common interpretation, that the sons of God are like these fallen angels, taking wives from the daughters of men and them mixing, and the Nephilim being a product of those unnatural unions. So the Nephilim are like these angel-human hybrids. I call this creatively the angel-human hybrid view. So some of these I couldn't really think of creative ways to say them, so I'm just calling it the angel-human hybrid view. So there's a number of lines of evidence that have been used to support this. One of them comes from Jude, verses 5 through 7. If you want to turn there, again, you can use this handout kind of as a bookmark. So Jude verses 5 through 7. Jude is only one chapter, so that's why there's no chapter number, for those of you who didn't know that. But this is Jude verses 5 through 7. If you ever read Jude, it's like one of those books where every verse is like, what on earth does that mean? There's a lot of strange things that he talks about here. And this is one of them. He's talking about angels. So this is verses 5 through 7 in Jude. It says, Now I want to remind you, although you once fully knew it, that Jesus, who saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed those who did not believe, and the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, he has kept for eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. Just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities, which likewise indulged in sexual immorality and pursued unnatural desire, serve as an example by undergoing a punishment of eternal fire. So this talks about angels like kind of falling from their position of authority and going to do things that they weren't created to do, right? And even compares that to what Sodom and Gomorrah did with these, sexual relations that were unnatural, right? So the one way to interpret this has been that this is talking about angels that came down before the flood and had unnatural sexual relationships with women, right? That's one way to read this. The hard thing is this isn't really that's not explicitly said in the text. You see that? It's kind of vague. Like, what does it mean that the angels left their position of authority and did something that they weren't supposed to do? We're not really told. It just says that they did something that they weren't supposed to do, whether it was rebelling against God or behaving in a way that they weren't supposed to behave, right? In some ways, they sinned and fell from their position of authority. That's really all Jude says. It's some people can read Jude and get frustrated by how vague Jude is and Jude, just tell me what you mean by that. What are you referring to, right? But I'm just saying that as an example. That's one passage that you'll hear used to support this view that angels came down. The angels are the sons of God that came down from heaven and took wives from the women of the world at that time. Another line of evidence is that angels are sometimes called sons of God, especially in Job. In Job chapter 1, verse 6, 38, verse 7. And then there's again this reference to potentially an angel being like a son of God in Daniel 3:25. If you remember that verse where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are thrown into the furnace, and there's a fourth person with them who looks like one of the sons of God. Like that language is similar to what's described here, of the sons of God being taking wives from the daughters of men. So you might have heard too that the Nephilim were giants. Well, that comes from the Septuagint, which is the Greek Old Testament. And the word that's used, translated from Hebrew to Greek, is the Greek word giant. So that's where we get this tradition that these were giants, is because the Septuagint translates it that way. So Nephilim, when you read that word, it's just a transliteration. They're just giving you an English pronunciation of the Hebrew word. So that word, we don't really know exactly what it means. I haven't seen a lot of evidence that it means giant, like the Hebrew word. But it could come from a Hebrew root word meaning nafal, which means to fall. It's an easy mnemonic, if you're wondering what that Hebrew word is. So in which case, Nephilim would be something like the fallen ones. And that has also been used to support this idea that the Nephilim are the product of fallen angels having sexual relations with human women. All right, before I go on and give like a critique of this view, I'm going to throw some monkey wrenches into, like you might think, all right, that makes sense. I get that. But just to make things interesting, I'm going to throw some monkey wrenches into this, some things that don't add up if this is true. But any questions on this, on the evidence that I've thrown out there? Yeah, Tom.
You didn't mention this, probably enough. You have, I'm not sure about it.
Yeah.
Why? Would you associate it with the sons of God?
Yeah, I think he's seen as a descendant of the Anakim, and the Anakim are seen as descendants of the Nephilim. Yeah, so that would be, there would be a connection of giants there too. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
So how did we get to the point where angels have like physical bodies, have sex with them? Like, where did that happen?
Well, that's actually, I didn't put that here, but that's actually one of the criticisms of this view, is that it kind of seems to suggest that angels have physical bodies and also have gender. And Jesus seems to teach, when he says like, after the final judgment, like once Jesus returns, like we will be like the angels, neither marrying nor being given in marriage, right? So how would the angels suddenly be able to marry when Jesus seems to say that they can't marry? Yeah, they don't have gender in that sense, right? Yeah.
That verse, I wouldn't say that supports what you say.
Okay, yeah. I was just saying that's a criticism. You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
That it just means that we'll be like them in that they don't marry. It doesn't
Yeah.
really say anything about it.
Yeah, so you could say that angels choose not to marry, but they can, right?
Well, I'm not saying that either. I'm just saying.
Okay.
The physical, we're just not going to have, marriage isn't going to be the way it is.
Yeah, I hear, yeah.
But my point that I wanted to make about Lorraine's question, I just listened to John MacArthur preach on this, and he was saying that the wickedness that was going on, that he said there's not a closet, there's not a store where the angels go in and say, I can afford you large. But rather, the human race of men were so perverted that they invited the demons or the fallen demons love them and have a body. They don't,
Yeah.
They don't have they don't have a closet of bodies that they.
Yeah.
So I had never heard, I thought that was a good point. I had never heard that,
Yeah.
that the men, you know, were so perverted that they wanted to be inhabited
Yeah.
by the angel.
Yeah. So that would be one way to interpret it too, is that the fallen angels possessed men, like human men, and made them do these things or something like that. Yeah, that would be one way to see this too. Yeah, Alan.
Well, in reference to that, there's a place in the New Testament where it talks about an evil spirit. And he goes wandering and he says, I'll return to my home. And Jesus is talking about those who are in rebellion against God. So that's kind of an interesting, because I'll return to my home in that parable.
Yeah.
This idea of angels looking like men, Abraham sees three men. What's presented to us is three men approaching him. One is the Lord and two are angels. And it talks about the two men going to Sodom and Gomorrah.
Right.
We're assuming those are angels. They are really angels.
But they're taking the appearance or the form.
Say that they look unusual or anything. They just appear
Yeah.
like men.
Yeah.
And so in other places in the Old Testament, when there's a, like you have the birth of, was it Samson? And then the people that appear don't appear to be like spacemen. They just appear to be wonderful people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But could, so I would, like what you said, but it could be that a non-fallen angel could do that. Or could a fallen angel, I mean, maybe they can't just take on a form.
Yeah. 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 I hope you guys are we're going to move on here, but I hope you guys are seeing this. We could talk about this a long time, right? Like once you get down on this rabbit trail, you could speculate and come up with all different kinds of theories of how this works. But I'm just trying to paint a big group picture here that that's what we're doing. We're getting pretty speculative here. So like, I mean, ultimately, we're not certain, like we don't know. We can come up with theories that make sense. I think that the demon possession view is very possible. Like, I think that could have happened. I think also could have been something like angels taking the form of men. That in itself was like what was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. There's some mystery there. Okay, let me explain. I'll take some more comments, but let me explain some of the reasons why someone might be skeptical. Throw some monkey wrenches into this framework. All right, so bear with me here. So first monkey wrench that I'm going to throw into this, and I didn't write this down. There's some evidence against this, but the monkey wrenches I'm throwing in are a bit different than the evidence against here. It's not clear from the text that the Nephilim are actually the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. When you read the verse, it says, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. So that's kind of like a parenthetical comment. It's just saying, at that time, when the sons of God were marrying the daughters of men, there were these Nephilim. And it says the Nephilim were there after the days of the flood, is what it seems to say, right? So it's possible, it's kind of weird to think about it, but it's possible the Nephilim are just something entirely different and aren't actually the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. Because it just says that the Nephilim were on the earth at that time when the sons of God came into the daughters of man and they bore children to them, right? So that's a fun thing to think of. Wait a minute. Like, the Nephilim could be just something completely different than what they're talking about with the sons of God marrying the daughters of men. We don't know. That's a possibility, right? All right, so that's monkey wrench number one. Monkey wrench number two, and that is like the Nephilim are described as being on the earth after the flood. That gets really weird. Just think about that. Wait a minute. If the whole world was flooded and everything was wiped out except for Noah and the ark, how did the Nephilim survive? Huh. That's an interesting quandary. Like, what does it mean that they endured after the flood? And, we're going to get to this, but really quickly, the defenders of the views that the Nephilim are the product of angels and daughters of men would say that it happened again after the flood. So there's like an unrecorded kind of thing that happened where the angels came down again after the flood and corrupted men and created these Nephilim again. That's possible, but, still kind of like you get out, that's really speculative, right? So that's kind of a monkey wrench. Okay, a third monkey wrench to throw into this view is that what it means in verse 3, this it says, "Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. Okay, so here's something you may not have thought of. What is that 120 years referring to? A lot of people think that 120 years is referring to the limiting man's lifespan, right? So that after that point, man's years are going to be limited to 120 years. Well, if that's true, if you look at the lineage of Noah, him and his sons actually lived to be quite over 120 years, a long ways over 120 years. And that happens for a little bit, like a few generations after this. It takes a while for that to take into effect, right? So maybe you could say, well, that's like a delayed reaction or something, or a gradual limitation of man's years. But there's an alternative explanation that the 120 years is a countdown to the flood. Like it's saying, the Spirit is saying, I won't deal with mankind as a whole forever. Their days are numbered. On 120 years, I'm flooding the whole earth. So you could interpret it that way too. So I share all these things to share, this is a very familiar text. And I think a lot of times when you read texts that are really familiar to you, you can gloss over some of these details. You don't pay attention. You can stop asking questions. So I'm actually encouraging you guys, keep asking questions of these texts that we can be really familiar with, because there's things that, because you've read it so often, you miss, okay? All right. Yeah, Scott.
On this second that you're talking about, it sounds like you're saying there's another creation that happened of beings, not angels, not man, that is nothing. And nowhere in the Bible does it say that God has stopped creating or didn't create something before,
Yeah.
and then those beings then went to earth at some point and it happened. Is that what you're saying?
Well, so if you're holding to the view that these are angels, the sons of God are angels,
Different category altogether. Not
well,
angels, not you.
so I'm just laying this out. So the sons of God on this view would be angels. The daughters of men would be men. The Nephilim would be like, yeah, you're saying a third, like a hybrid. That's an interesting question. Is this something that God didn't create? It's like an aberration or something that is like some kind of third? Yeah, that would get weird. That's true. I need to think about that actually. Did I see, Dan, did you have your hand up earlier? Yeah, what did you want to say? I'll go to you, Alan, after that.
Well, things now is just like talk about 120 years. I think it's the same case when in the beginning God said, if you eat from the fruit, you're certainly going to die. But it took 900 years for it to die, literally.
Uh-huh.
So this same thing I think if it happens later, God said, their days are going to be 120. And if you can see graphs from Adam, and then it hits the flood, and then you see the curve drop in 4 or 5 generations.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, you could take it that way for sure. Yeah, I've heard that argument. Yeah, that's possible.
Another point that was back a little bit before, I was thinking this week actually.
there's a hierarchy of demons. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just up the words in Greek that, I don't know, something like that, I'm interested.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, getting into that I think that would require us to get into yet another rabbit trail. I think we've opened enough cans of worms. But yeah, Alan, did you have?
Maybe this is the next rabbit trail. I heard this is maybe a mixing of the line of Seth with Cain.
Yeah, that's the next view we're going to talk about.
And said, okay, you guys can't, this is bad news.
Yeah,
Plus, they produced great children. They weren't godly, but they were great. They
Yeah.
were warriors of miracles.
yeah,
They were leaders, they were commanders, they took over the world. They weren't godly.
yeah.
God said, I'm gonna limit you now because you're wicked.
Yeah, so let's move to we're going to move to the Seth/Cainite line view soon. Deborah, sorry, you had your hand up earlier. Did you still want to share?
Alan addressed it earlier.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah, Hillary.
Well, because I've got my phone, I was looking up, different websites, and the Jewish scholars consider that the Nephilim were giants, so like just genetic human being giants, like Wyatt was a Nephilim. And so I kind of figured we probably killed them because we didn't watch giants.
Yeah.
People were like, okay, we gotta get rid of the giants.
Yeah.
Why they don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah, that's possible. All right, so there's, wait, I gotta continue. Hold on. I know you guys keep talking about this. Okay, we gotta keep moving so we can get through as much of this as possible. All right. I already listed that the Nephilim are never explicitly mentioned as being the offspring of the sons of God and daughters of men. They're just kind of mentioned alongside. So it's possible that they are the offspring of the sons of God and daughters of men, but we don't know. They could be something else. Another question that I have for this view is, if the sons of God are fallen angels, why have they retained their heavenly title of sons of God? The interesting thing is, if you go to Job chapter 1, verse 6, it says the sons of God they're kind of described as like this heavenly council, went before God, to kind of pay homage or to discuss, deliberate, do whatever they're going to do. And it says, and Satan was also with them. Doesn't explicitly say that Satan was still called a son of God in this way. So that's one question. Are fallen angels still properly considered sons of God? One other thing, too, is the sons of God and the daughters of men are described in very human terms. There's not really a hint in the immediate context that they were anything other than human. I mean, the offspring of the sons of God and daughters of men are men of renown, men of, mighty men, right? But they're still described as men, as humans. So that also seems like what's in the immediate context is that we're talking about humans. Again, that's not like none of these are knockdown arguments, right? But they're kind of questions that you might ask of this view. And also, no mention of God punishing these angelic sons of God. God only punishes mankind. So if this is a major sin on the part of angels, why aren't angels punished for this? And if especially if they come down and do it again after the flood, like, why does God let them do it a second time? It's another question that I have for this view, right? Like, yeah.
That's the answer with you. They're in prison. There's angels who are in prison.
Right, but they're in prison, but yet they do it again after the flood. If you take this view and you say that
Not the ones that are in prison. It would be other fallen.
oh, okay, that's an interesting thought. So other fallen angels that didn't do it the first time came down again after the flood and did that again. Okay, that's an interesting, yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Wouldn't it be like the need for there to be extra people populate the earth? I mean, back at the beginning, everybody assumes Adam and Eve's kids are having sex with each other to populate the earth. So the
Yeah, that's yet another rabbit trail. You guys are getting it. There's like a million different rabbit trails you can go down with this. Yeah.
That is Satan or the fallen angels trying to corrupt the seed that's promised in Genesis 3:15.
Yeah, that's possible. That's what people will say is like, yeah, the angels are trying to prevent that promise from coming about. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so wait, I know. Okay, Norman, can you make it quick? And then we got to move on.
I would just like to mention that I work with severely mentally ill people, and the Nephilim is a very, very popular topic in the spiritual community. And they usually try and link it to aliens, and it's.
There's the aliens.
And it's generally a real big distraction because it allows them to be religious without engaging with the gospel.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. I think if you get nothing out of this, I think this is the key, is that angels, the frustrating thing that a lot of people have is that angels aren't, we're not given a lot of information about angels. And I think God has done that intentionally. Because if we focus all of our attention on angels, we kind of miss the point. It's not really about angels. It's about God. And angels often in Scripture do become idols, where people end up worshiping angels. Multiple times you see in Scripture angels having to get people to stop worshiping them. Like, no, worship God. You know, like I'm just an angel. I'm just a messenger. You know, and I think we need to be careful about this. So I'm laying out these arguments in these different positions. I'm intentionally going down these rabbit trails to say that we have to be, we should be aware about these things, but hold them lightly. You know, if you get too dogmatic and get caught up in all these speculative debates, you just can miss the gospel. You lose sight of the forest through the trees. You know, so it's good for us to ask questions of the text. It's actually, I don't think it's bad to have these arguments or discussions. They just shouldn't, you know, be in our level of priority above talking about the gospel, focusing on Jesus, focusing on the glory of God. Like those things need to be first and primary. These things are fun to talk about. Sometimes we can talk about things and think things through at a deeper level and learn things about Scripture that can be helpful. But if we're getting into really intense debates and arguments about this and getting really heated about it, might need to question our priorities, right? Are we putting the cart before the horse here? Like, probably shouldn't be getting this intense about it. All right, I just want to lay out really quickly this view that these are the lines of Seth and Cain. This is actually a view that goes back to the early church. I was surprised to learn this. This has been something that Christians haven't agreed on for 2,000 years. There's been different views on who the Nephilim are. Surprise, surprise, right? But one of these views has been that the sons of God are the line of Seth, and the daughters of men is the line of Cain. And the way this is laid out, some of the reasons why people have thought this, is when you read Genesis 4 and 5 directly before this, there are two genealogies given, one of the line of Cain and one of the line of Seth. And they're kept pretty separate, but they also run parallel. It's really interesting when you look into the line of Cain. There's a lot of discussion of violence, revenge. There's even mention of one member of the line of Cain developing weaponry for war. And there's these parallel names. There's an Enoch in both the line of Cain and the line of Seth. But only the Enoch in the line of Seth is said to have walked with God and been taken up in heaven. There's two different Lamechs. The Lamech in the line of Cain is like the most violent and revenge-filled one of his lineage, and the Lamech in the line of Seth is the one who fathers Noah, and he says Noah's going to relieve us of our pain and suffering. There's this promise of that. Whereas Lamech and Cain's line seems intent on increasing suffering and, increasing violence on the earth. The Lamech and Seth's line seems determined to reduce it, So, there is a reason why these genealogies are there. They're giving us a outline of God's redemptive plan, and they're giving us a sense in which the line of Seth is faithfully, carrying down, passing on from generation to generation the good news of the gospel. I think Bill talked about this last week in his sermon, that each one is carrying on this promise that there would be the seed of Eve who would crush the head of the serpent. And the line of Cain has not been doing that at all. So, so another argument for this is that if you look at Luke 3:38, we won't turn there, but Seth is described as the son of Adam, and Adam is described as the son of God. So you can infer from that, well, maybe the sons of God are the line of Seth, which is this more direct line to Adam, who is the son of God, just as Luke gives us genealogy in chapter 3. All right, maybe that's possible. What's also interesting is that in verse 2, if you look in verse 2 of Genesis chapter 6, Genesis chapter 6, verse 2, what does it say? The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive, and they took as their wives any that they chose. Does that sound familiar? Seeing and taking, that language. We've seen that language before, right? Eve does this. She sees that the fruit is good for eating and desirable to make one wise, and she takes of the fruit and she eats of it, right? So there's a similar language of, kind of falling from grace, that they see and they take something that they shouldn't be taking, right? So, those are some of the reasons for. Let me go through some of the arguments against this view, and then we can take a little bit more comments, and I think we got to end it there. So the evidence against is that there's these two instances in verses 1 and 2 of the word man, and these are the same word Adam. Adam in Hebrew just means man. And this view kind of requires you to say that in verse 1, man is referring to mankind in general, meaning both the lines of Seth and Cain. But then in verse 2, the daughters of man has to refer only to the line of Seth, which seems a little awkward, like both seem to be mankind or something like that. Nothing really justifies seeing man there as referring to something more specific. Also, the way the sons of God are described in Genesis 6, they seem to be the bad guys. They are the ones seeing and taking. And some people have critiqued, what is going on with if these are the sons of Seth, something has got, people, advocates of the view would agree with this, but it seems almost as though the sons of God are wicked and evil, like taking advantage of the daughters of man. And the daughters of man, if these are from the line of Cain, like there's no resistance. You'd think the sons of Cain would come and resist the sons of Seth, right? Like that seems a bit awkward. And then I think one of the biggest things is the Sethite line are never described as being the sons of God, plural, in the immediate context. In Genesis 5, they're not described that way. So, so that's the view, kind of arguments for and against. I'd like, if we have a little bit of time, there's this third view on the back. I'd like to explain before we close in prayer here. So this comes from a professor at Westminster, the tyrannical